Welcome to the Industrial IoT Spotlight, your number one spot for insight from industrial IoT thought leaders who are transforming businesses today. With your host, Eric Walenza.
Welcome back to the Industrial IoT Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Eric Walenza, CEO of IoT One, the consultancy that helps companies create value from data to accelerate growth. Our guest today is Francesco Sammartini, Managing Director of Advanced Microwave Engineering, or AME. AME provides end-to-end active safety solutions based on proprietary technology that helps companies achieve the highest level of safety for workers while maintaining operational efficiency. In this talk, we discuss the transition from passive safety oriented around minimizing damage to active safety that focuses on using intelligent systems to avoid dangers. We also explored the importance of a customer-centric approach in industrial environments to ensure that solutions are designed for the needs of end users and for business processes. If you find these conversations valuable, please leave us a comment and a 5-star review. And if you'd like to share your company's story or recommend a speaker, please email us at team@iot1.com. Finally, if you have an IoT research, strategy, or training initiative that you'd like to discuss, you can email me directly at erik.walenza@iot1.com. Francesco, thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
My pleasure, Eric.
So I tell you, I've been doing a lot of very technology-oriented podcasts lately. So companies that are building cloud infrastructure, even very specific tools for developers. And I'm really looking forward to this one because it's a completely different business, right? You are oriented around not a technology, not an industry vertical, but maybe a use case or a problem to solve. In this case, the problem of safety. So Francesco, really looking forward to this podcast. But before we get into that topic, I'd love to just learn a little bit more about yourself. Where are you coming from and how did you find yourself in this field of safety?
I am senior consultant here at AME, Advanced Microwaves, here in Florence. I've been here for 2.5 years. But before that, my experience, almost 30 years in the small electric kind of industry for Italian companies, both based here in Italy and in the UK. I joined here because it is more exciting kind of world than the one I've always belonged to. Quite excited to be part of this new adventure into what we call active safety.
Well, tell me, what is exciting here? Because, I can imagine if you look at a construction site, there were probably things that people were doing 30 years ago as normal business that today nobody would even think about doing in terms of safety, right? So I guess there's been some change here, but for you, what are the big changes? What's exciting about the world of safety today?
Is a complete change of approach and attitude. The safety has always been a cost to companies. How much do I have to spend for, personal protection equipment, safety shoes, high visibility vest, you name it, Safety has always been considered a cost, a must-have, and a pain, let me say, for all in companies. What we are trying to do here is to turn it into an investment instead. That's why we call it active safety. So cost is the passive safety, meaning the equipment that you use to reduce the damage. Okay? Basically that. Active safety, moves into prevention. Okay? Avoid the damage to happen. Anticipate that.
So passive safety would be saying, let's make sure people have the right shoes and the right goggles and so forth, and they can survive the damage that they're going to face. And active is saying, okay, let's create environments where we avoid this situation entirely by sensing the world and kind of managing our operations. Is that kind of a reasonable way to think about it?
Absolutely correct. It is to provide all elements of the environment, the workplace environment. So pedestrians on one side, operators on one side, vehicles and their drivers on the other, a device, an equipment that is making them, each one of them, visible to the others, so that you know exactly where all the other elements are, and avoid, any possible damage and or incident. Okay. So again, it's a question of anticipating the risk and evaluating the risk at the same time.
We'll get into the technology later. I'm quite interested in kind of the solutions, but before we go into the technology, because that's certainly, a big change, right? A lot of these things just weren't technically feasible 20 years ago and they are today. But I think there's probably some other things here. There's topics like just the mindset of management. Maybe there's topics for financially, how do people think about the cost of safety? There's probably been a lot of regulatory change. So if you look at the topic of safety, aside from the technology, what else is driving companies to rethink how they address this topic?
Look, all major and big conglomerates, they have safety as part of their mission. That was not the case 20 or maybe even 15 years ago. Why it is so? Because safety is one of the leverage in the new world of social media, of complete and continuous interactions. Safety is one of the topics that can make the headlines, right? So it is important that you provide a safety environment for your employees. And in terms of mindset, this has been making a great change or meaning a great change for loads of companies, not only the big conglomerates, but even the small and medium companies as well. It's part of the well-being and of the employees.
If we look at this globally, how do you see this? Because I guess I would consider Europe to be the center of the world in terms of actually caring about your employee well-being. I'm here in China, and to some extent, the government actually does care a lot and has certain protections around employees. But then you also sometimes see people welding and they'll just put a piece of paper in front of their face to ward off the sparks and so forth. So it's certainly not kind of a European environment in a lot of ways. If you look at the world, would you say that this is a kind of a global trend, or it's a trend that's at first being pushed by certain regions and certain industries, and maybe it's catching on slowly in other areas?
The last thing you said there is for most probably the best way to draw the picture or the actual picture. It is something that is growing gradually and slowly throughout all regions, but we see, of course, many differences between them. From our point of view, even the US is not as developed in terms of consciousness regarding the safety issues or the awareness of the tools that are available, not as Europe. But they're all coming on board, most of all, of the fact that the conglomerates present everywhere around the globe. And of course, they need and want to have the same kind of policies, no matter where they are. So it could be Latin America, China, Southeast Asia, or Europe, doesn't make any difference. So that is helping, and this is what helped us developing our business in the past, working with these big names in all across industries that would help us, let me say, spread the word regarding these new tools that can help you increase not only safety, but also the efficiency of your operations.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, corporates or conglomerates, they do have more global standards. And I think a lot more are also pushing their suppliers to adhere to certain standards as well. So I suppose that starts to really impact every corner of the world. Let's talk, Francesco, a bit more about your customers then. So maybe first from the vertical perspective, what are the major industries for AME?
Well, look, AME is based in Florence, Italy, and just next door or around the corner here towards the coast, there's one of the major European districts of the papery. And now by chance, we started with them. And what worked for us was the word of mouth. So we started with one. AME actually won a local award for technological innovation. And from that moment on, the phone kept ringing. All the others wanted to join us, let me say. So the paper industry was the first one we adopted our systems, and we grew from there. From paper, we went on to food and beverage, to cosmetics, to automotive, just to name a few.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, I mean, I guess this is a very horizontal problem, right? It's a problem that anybody who's operating heavy equipment and so forth is going to address.
Absolutely transversal. When I met the entrepreneurs, the two founders of the company here, Claudio and Filippo are actually former professors at Florence University, professors of electronics there. When they started the company, they understood that there would be a lot of potential in developing the products that are part of our portfolio today. When I met them myself 2.5 years ago, coming from a world where you knew exactly where the shelf was starting, so for small electricals, for any kind or most of products, you know exactly what space you have in any single market. Well, here, vice versa, the market is absolutely liquid because you can really apply these kind of safety, active safety solutions to any kind of industry slash environment. So from intralogistics to tunnels to construction, port terminals. So really, there's no limit to it. It's just a question of making people aware there are such solutions available.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm interested. I was, looking at the history of the company. So it's about 23, 24 years old right now. And the name is, I guess the traditional name or still the legal name is Advanced Microwave Engineering. And now it's branded as AME. And this gives me as an outsider the feeling that two professors, they founded it and they're coming from an engineering background. So they founded it probably around a specific, set of technologies that they had developed.
Correct.
And now the business has evolved from a company that's oriented around a couple of specific technologies towards a business that's oriented around a problem to solve, right? Where there's a lot of different technologies. Now you have a very complex tech stack, right? That's everything from sensors up to the cloud.
Correct.
So interesting kind of business philosophy of the evolution, because you see a lot of other companies that might have said, let's just build sensors and then we'll figure out all the potential use cases for our sensors and take that more technology oriented. Do you have any kind of insight into why they chose that kind of that business philosophy for oriented around a problem? Yeah.
Eric, every single company now starts from an idea. And the idea was, again, guarding sensors, talking to each other. So the product was the core and still is in a way that we do own our own technologies, no? And with trademarks, patents, etc. What made the difference for Claudio and Filippo was that they would listen to people they were talking to, their clients, listen to their requirements, and they're not trying to impose their own jargon, but just to try and really wear their shoes, the others' shoes. So, and translate our products into solutions for those specific requirements. So this is why the approach now is so broad. It's not just one or two sensors, one or two whatever softwares. Is wider, is more omnicomprehensive because of always chasing the correct answer to the specific questions that the clients may pose.
Okay. No, makes sense. I mean, very customer centric. I think that's a
Absolutely.
great way to run a business. It's not necessarily the way that a lot of tech companies run their business, but it's a good approach. One more question just around the business side before we get into the solutions. So I understand the industries you're working in. Who are the decision makers in those? Because I guess you have operating teams, you might have a maintenance team, but you're also touching base with, you have the IT teams who might be actually working with you on deployment. So who would you typically be working with?
Our first point of contact or port of call would be HSE managers, health and safety managers, because those guys are the ones that we know to speak the same language or understand more about safety. Through that, Eric, most of the times, or many times, health and safety managers, counselors, let me say, to their own business or their businesses. What our challenge always is to make those guys, health and safety managers, our ambassadors within their own organizations in order to take on board those other managers, mid to high level managers that have the budget to spend. That could be on a local level, site managers, plant managers, operation managers, as well as, of course, the board managers at a higher level. But the first port of call would be really the health and safety manager.
Okay, clear. Well, let's get into the solutions now. So If I look at the high level understanding, you have solutions that are oriented around specific problems like traffic management, anti-crushing. Then you have a kind of a service, it looks like a service platform. You also have a cloud data management platform.
Yeah.
Help us think through, how would you think through the portfolio of AME?
We have different solutions to respond to specific different needs. And across two different technologies that are both radio based. The aim is to connect, as I said earlier, different elements of the environment in order for them to talk to each other, signal their presence to each other, in order to make more potentially dangerous elements of the matrix, that is normally machinery, vehicles, truck, or you name it, aware of the presence of others around them and change their behavior correspondingly. And this is the starting point. Then what we have developed is full analysis of these interactions and events and the calculation of the actual level of risk of these single interactions. Why doing that? Because we can learn from experience. Thanks to the machine learning, we can then build a database of actual facts that can help managers take decisions in order to increase the safety levels that are at the same time helping increasing the standards of efficiency of their operations. So we always have a real-time, one-to-one connection between the different elements in this environment, and then elaborate and analyze data coming from these interactions in order to really evaluate the actual level of risk of those interactions. So physically, you have a transponder. You, Eric, you would have a transponder. Me, Francesco, driving a vehicle, I would have a system installed on my vehicle that would see exactly where you are at any given time, not only how far you are from me, but evaluate your speed relative to my own speed and the direction of travel of you, Eric, against or compared to the direction of travel of my truck. This would help evaluate the actual level of risk of that encounter, right? If you are walking towards me and I'm driving at 10 miles an hour towards you, well, we definitely have quite a serious level of danger and risk. But if I'm driving away from you, or if you are moving away from me, then the level of risk is much lower. This is what the new system Atmosphere does.
So if I look at your solutions, you have these solutions that are oriented around use cases. And I guess that's kind of the sensor and the configuration is designed for different environments.
Correct.
And then Atmosphere is kind of the back-end analytics platform for making decisions based on the data and then putting them through some kind of user interface or automating a control feature on a forklift or a device.
Yes.
Is that the connection?
It is. And Atmosphere in particular is starting again from what people are telling us. We need to provide, the mantra is, the more sophisticated the solution, the easier must be the translation into operation. What I mean by this, we are storing and analyzing in real time all these interactions and events, right? But then to make them proper tools to improve safety and efficiency levels, you have to make them as easy as possible to read. And this is why we have created an index so that people in one number can see whether things are going right or wrong. It's called the ESI, so Efficiency and Safety Index. And it is literally one number that would appear on your dashboard. So in 1 second, you would understand whether things are going well or not. We have in mind what you have on dashboards typical of the apps, the health apps, or the apps you would use for your exercise, like cycling or running or whatever. Of course, they would be full of different performance indicators, but at the same time, they would provide a proper, very quick and easy to read snapshot of the status of your health or training or whatever, right? This is what we're trying to do, and we are doing with the ESI, as we call it in Italian, so the ESI, no? Efficiency and Safety Index. So trying to help managers. Because, by the way, sorry, Eric, sorry, but this is important. We have to be realistic. Safety, it is as important as one of the number of course, things managers have to take care of, right? So we need to keep it easy and immediate for managers to understand where they are with it, because otherwise they would not use it because too convoluted or too difficult to then export or pass on to the other managers inside the company.
Yeah, I like that philosophy. So the more complicated something is under the hood, the simpler it needs to be up front, right? I think that applies to a lot of different solutions. So I get the technology stack or the solution now. Maybe we can make it a bit more concrete by looking at one or two customer examples. Are there a couple of use cases you could walk us through?
Yeah, I would just ask you not to mention the names. For example, very recently, we installed our products at L'Oreal, their major distribution center in Germany, where on one side we provide them with the anti-collision devices and systems that they onboard every single one of the trucks they use in their warehouse, and the adoption of a tag, personal tag transponder for every single one of their operators, so that the trucks always know where the operators are. And as they get closer to operators, the speed reduction is automatically triggered. And this is one thing. At the same time, on the same trucks, we have adopted our zoning plus system for automatically to talk to the infrastructure and automatically open gate roller shutters or whatever as they come close to them, or to evidentiate those most potentially hazardous areas inside the warehouse, like pedestrian crossings or blind corners, and again automatically trigger a speed reduction of the vehicles on one side, and the switching on of alarm light or flashing light for the pedestrians in that same area.
Okay, clear. Yeah, it seems very practical.
Oh, yeah, it is practical. Ecco, bravissimo, Eric. This is the way to define it. We could go on for hours talking about the technology, but the important thing is to see it in practice. If you make your potentially dangerous vehicles to smoothly decrease their speed as they get closer to, again, a specific zone inside their warehouse or working environment, or other operators, then that allows the driver to focus on their own proper job because the system would do for them on one side. On the other, this would mean and translate into more kilometers made, more miles made per shift. The more kilometers you make per shift, the more job you can deploy. That is where the increase of efficiency.
Yeah, so I can see it really thinking carefully through, the user journey, right, or the specific tasks that somebody is doing. I'm curious, as a business, are you typically trying to have a direct relationship with the customer where you have people on the ground kind of walking through the site and understanding the process with them? Or is there often a system integrator who might be doing that job and then identifying you as a technology provider to solve a certain problem?
Ideally, we always wanted to be in direct contact with the end user, so-called end user, because we don't sell a product, we sell a consultancy, we sell a service, and we want to understand their peculiar requirements. Through that, between us and the end user, then the manufacturers of providers of machinery or forklifts, trucks, vehicles in general, right? So it is, there are a lot of stakeholders or logistic partners as well So there are a lot of stakeholders, and while having a direct, trying to keep a direct contact with the end user, we need to get on board also the other stakeholders for them to understand how we can help improve their own service to the end user.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. So usually you're selling an integrated solution, which means upfront consulting to help them define the requirements and the right solution. And then you also have your own hardware with your own IP and then the cloud integration, et cetera. So end to end. I had another question. Just looking at some of your use cases there, some of them are related to putting sensors on workers and then tracking location. Obviously, that's very useful for safety.
Absolutely.
I know that Europe also has very stiff privacy requirements around PII. So I'm curious, how do you address that as a company to make sure that you can solve the problem while adhering to privacy?
Again, this is part of the direct contact and the good cooperation and collaboration with the end users, because every single device we provide carries its own serial number. And these are what we're dealing with, numbers or serial. Then it's to the end user to give a name to those serial numbers. So to pair the personal tag to the single operator or the serial number of this vehicle system to the driver on that specific shift. Of course, we do not name them, but we only have numbers. And of course, all these informations are kept because of the sensitivity of those informations are kept absolutely. Well, it is the end user who keep them because it is again in their own interest to see and check what the status and the performances are. But there's absolute privacy because, of course, it's paramount important that data are kept for what they are. So even when we do talk about case histories, or we normally never mention specific peculiar cases because of the sensitivity of those information.
Yeah, clear. Okay. So you make sure that from a system perspective, it's anonymized, and then it's kind of up to the customer to decide how do they want to frame their system. Okay. There might be a couple other things that you want to also touch on, but Francisco, the last thing that I had on my agenda here was to understand more technology innovation over the next 12 months, 24 months. What's in the pipeline? I mean, it looks like this AME Sphere solution is relatively new, so it looks like that's a big direction you're moving in. But what are you excited about over the next couple of years in terms of new technology development?
Is opening the door to a new dimension of safety from our point of view. We're going to launch it at the next ProMat next week in Chicago for the US market, and then Logimat in Germany in end of April for Europe. Why I'm saying so? Because safety, I already mentioned now that we're talking about active safety compared or opposite to passive safety. We are now with Atmosphere moving active safety into the proper dimension because the future in providing not just data but actual facts to users of our systems in order to help their decision process. Okay? So this is where the future is. Based on the experience we have of interactions and events, I do not just count them, but I properly evaluate the level of risk of every single one of them. Then is making me aware of where the problems are, of what the problems are at any given time. So providing me actual information to base my next decision on. So the future is on the anti-collision per se, but making anti-collision as a proper constructive tool to increase, say, not only safety standards, but in fact, efficiency of your operation.
Okay, understood. So moving much more into analytics layer, into
absolutely
kind of platform across, so not just two devices interacting with each other, but a system of moving parts within a factory.
Correct. But always keeping the bottom-up kind of approach. So we are always starting from the single effective relation between that vehicle and that other vehicle or operator, that specific time. In order to make it safe, that real time is proper real time, okay? And the reaction, and so the prevention of the damage, let me say, is always there. Then you grow it from there and build on the analysis of the thousands, if not millions of interactions you may have on any given period of time, provided the information, but actual information, not just data, proper factual information for people to make their own decision.
Yeah, it looks like there might be a bit of an extension here as well. If I'm looking at your core solutions, it looks like pretty much the whole tech stack is provided by AME, right? So you're providing the sensors. With Atmosphere, I'm assuming that you're also ingesting data from third-party devices, et cetera. Is that the case, or is everything typically coming from an AME device? Or?
No, it's coming from AME device.
It is, okay.
And we all store data on our platform. Of course, we give access to the platform to our clients so that they will have this dashboard with all the key performance indicators as well as the index, the ESI index I was telling you about. But it's based on our own interactions because, of course, we talking about devices that speaking the same language. So they communicate to each other constantly.
I'm curious, how much is this a challenge in industry? Because in industry, you often have, things grow organically, right? It's like you buy 3 devices now, and then next year you buy another 5, and then you deploy a system A, and then next year you deploy system B. And so you end up having this proliferation of sensors from different companies and forklifts from different companies. Is that a challenge to actually get a customer kind of oriented around a particular tech stack?
It can be a challenge, but at the same time, we are ready to face that challenge because another part of our business is the role of system integrator for example, the tunneling industry, where we have quite a big experience of big projects handled and managed throughout the globe, not only in terms of the collision and tracking of operator workings in such environments, but also providing different other systems. So look, the advantage we have is that we own the technology. B, we have a very strong team of software specialists as well as R&D engineers can be integrating different systems together all their life within the company. And this is the important thing. Again, we have to be realistic and understand from our customers what their priorities are. But then we are there able to tailor our solutions around their needs. Because, of course, we cannot have trucks tomorrow with 7 different displays and 10 different sensors. So we dare to take on this challenge to furthermore integrate the systems, having in mind the mission of increasing, again, not only safety, but efficiency of operations.
Yeah, great. Well, Francesco, I told you up front that my goal for the podcast was to make sure that by the end I understood the business, and I feel like I'm getting pretty close there. Are there any details that we haven't touched on that you think are important for folks to understand?
No, it's one thing I may mention is that we are growing very fast. While growing, we opened a subsidiary 2 years ago in Germany. Now we're opening a subsidiary in the US as well. We do that because we understand how important it is to be present. This is one of the things that are really winning for me. The fact that people have a great entrepreneurial spirit on one side, and on the other, fully understand that no matter how technological our solutions may be, you must be with your clients where they need you. Because our great, challenge or greatest challenge for them to understand what we are talking about. This is something new, so we need to be there to actually demonstrate factually what we mean when we talk about active safety and active prevention of the damage. That is something I would highlight as being one of our unique selling propositions. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Well, a lot of our listeners are actually based in the US and Germany. So that's great to know that you have a presence on the ground now. And for the folks that are listening, the website is ameol.it. Francesco, really, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Industrial IoT Spotlight. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at IoT1HQ and to check out our database of case studies on IoT1.com. If you have unique insight or a project deployment story to share, we'd love to feature you on a future edition. Write us at eric.walenza@IoT1.com.